Have you ever stopped to think what silence used to sound like? Before microphones, before speakers, before sound could come back to you. In 1877, a man named Thomas Edison pressed his lips to a metal horn and recited, "Mary had a little lamb." And for the first time in history, sound didn't vanish. It stayed, and it came back. That was the birth of recorded sound. A miracle, or maybe a ghost. Because hearing your own voice from that machine felt like meeting yourself from another world. They called it the talking machine, but really it was the first time memory learned how to hum. Edison never meant for it to make music. He thought it would be used for office notes, scientific dictation, maybe presidential speeches, but art has a way of hijacking technology. By the early 1900s, singers began recording songs on wax cylinders. Rough, imperfect, fragile. But even then, when a voice played back, it felt holy. Caruso's voice traveled through oceans, from an opera hall in Italy to parlors in India, London, and New York. The world's first global sound. People began to believe music wasn't just performance anymore, it was time travel. The phonograph grew into the gramophone. Shellac discs spun at 78 RPM, little galaxies of sound. Every scratch, every hiss was proof that a human being once stood in front of a horn and felt something. Every groove was a heartbeat trapped in wax. Every record was promise that beauty could survive decay. Families gathered around turntables like they were campfires. Dropping the needle became ritual. The hiss before the song, that was the sound of anticipation. Music became presence. Even when the artist was gone, the sound stayed. The laughter, the breath, the mistakes, everything became sacred once it could repeat. This wasn't just playback, it was resurrection. Edison thought he built a machine to record sound, but what he really built was a mirror, a way to look at yourself through echo. Every time you press play, you're defying time. You're bringing the past back to life. By the 1920s, the world had learned how to listen. Every city, every street corner had a sound. It wasn't just silence anymore, it was radio. Suddenly, sound wasn't private. It spilled out of living rooms, restaurants, taxis. People didn't just hear music, they shared it. Music became the first truly global conversation. No translation needed. A trumpet from New Orleans could make a dancer in Karachi sway without a single word spoken. That was the golden age of records. Round discs that turned our emotions into motion. When Louis Armstrong blew his horn, the world learned what joy sounded like. And when Noor Jahan sang Chandni Ratein, Pakistan heard what longing meant in a woman's voice. Vinyl wasn't just an object, it was a memory you could hold. Every scratch on its surface told you someone had lived that song before you. By the 1950s, vinyl became rebellion. Teenagers spun rock and roll in their rooms while their parents banged on doors. Elvis Presley moved his hips, and an entire generation lost its mind. But music was no longer something you consumed, it was something you became. It shaped your clothes, your hair, your accent, your attitude. You didn't just Karachi and London, New York and Lahore, all felt the same heartbeat synced by melody. And then something magical happened. For the first time, people began to buy albums, not for songs, but for stories. Pink Floyd told you to see you on the dark side of the moon. The Beatles asked you to let it be. Each record became a world you could step into, soundtracks for lives you hadn't lived yet. Every side of the record was a journey. Every flip of the vinyl, a new chapter. Sometimes I think we didn't fall in love with the music. We fell in love with the act of listening. The rituals, the friends sitting cross-legged on the floor, the late night talks when the record was still spinning, even though everyone was silent. The world wasn't divided by genre then. It was united by the crackle. By the time the 1970s arrived, sound had gone electric. Studios became temples, and musicians became alchemists. They could bend sound, stretch time, layer voices, and suddenly, art had no ceiling. Music stopped being a mirror. It became a universe. From Edison's horn to the record player's spin, humanity had captured more than sound. It had captured emotion. And emotion once recorded never dies. But the record wouldn't last forever because time, like melody, always wants to move forward. That click for an entire generation was the sound of beginning, the sound of ownership. Because when the cassette arrived, music finally became personal. Before that, you listened to what the radio gave you. But now, you could choose what lived in your pocket. You could rewind joy, fast forward heartbreak, and pause time itself. The cassette tape wasn't just a format, it was freedom, wound around two tiny reels. Suddenly, music didn't belong to corporations or stations, it belonged to you. And with it came something magical, the mixtape. Those who grew up in the 80s remember sitting by the radio, finger on the record button, waiting for your favorite song to play. The world holding still in that 1 second between. And now, number one, and the beat dropping. That's how love was expressed back then. Not through words, through 60 minutes of curated emotion, wrapped in magnetic tape. And here in Pakistan, the cassette became revolution. Before YouTube, before MP3s, cassettes carried our culture. Alamgir, Nazia and Zohaib, Vital Signs, they weren't just artists, they were architects of identity. It was a time where young people began to ask, who are we, really? After the silence. That song didn't just play on radios. It played in hearts. It reminded a new generation that being Pakistani wasn't about boundaries. It was about belonging. But cassettes weren't perfect. They hissed, they tangled, sometimes they melted under the sun. Yet, people loved them because they were fragile. Every tape carried fingerprints. Every copy added a little more imperfection, a little more humanity. Mixtapes became diaries, bootlegs became currency, and recording studios, once rare, began to appear in garages, basements, and small apartments. All you needed was courage, tape, and a dream. And that changed everything. Bands like Janoon used the cassette not just as a medium, but as a megaphone. Their music blended guitars, tabla, and rebellion. They called it Sufi rock. But really, it was the sound of Pakistan finding its soul again. I once asked a musician, what's the difference between a record and a cassette? He said, a record plays for everyone. A cassette plays for someone. And maybe that's why it felt intimate. Because every hiss, every rewind, every glitch, it was proof that you'd lived with the music. By the late 90s, tape culture was everything. Taxis had them, barbershops played them, lovers exchanged them. Every rewind button had seen more emotion than a poet's pen. But as the millennium approached, a new kind of silence began to grow. The kind of silence that comes before disruption. Technology was changing again, and sound was about to become invisible. From reels to tape, from tape to bits, the digital age was knocking, and music was about to lose its body, but maybe gain its wings. The turn of the millennium brought a revolution. The cassettes had faded. The vinyl was mostly collector's items, and in its place rose a new form of immortality, the digital file. Suddenly, music could travel faster than the speed of sound. Napster, LimeWire, these names became legends and scandals because for the first time you could hear any song from anywhere in the world instantly. It was both exhilarating and terrifying. The CD era tried to hold on to tangibility. A disc in your hand, the shine of the jewel case, the liner notes with lyrics and photos. It still felt human, but the internet was changing expectations. Listeners wanted instant access. Artists had to think globally. Suddenly, your audience was everywhere, from New York to New Delhi, London to Lahore, and in Pakistan. Music entered a golden hybrid age. Independent artists started recording at home, releasing on CDs, and sharing via the web. Platforms like Coke Studio merged tradition with modernity. Guitarists, guitar riffs intertwined with tabla. Electronic beats danced with folk melodies. For the first time, music wasn't just broadcast, it was curated. Listeners chose the story they wanted to hear, the emotion they wanted to feel. And then came streaming. Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, all the world's music became fluid. No more waiting for a friend to lend a cassette, no more searching through crates of vinyl. It was infinite. And yet, something subtle was lost. The ritual of pressing play, the physicality, the anticipation. Digital made music everywhere, but maybe nowhere at home. But art always finds a way. In Pakistan, a new generation arose. Independent producers uploading tracks online, fusing kavadi with trap beats, folk melodies with synthwave. The global stage was open, and suddenly the world was listening. Old legends returned digitally too. Vital Signs, Junoon, Noor Jahan. Their music streamed to a new audience, young and curious, connecting decades in minutes. The digital age made music immoral, but also ephemeral. Every track is endless, and yet every listener's attention is fleeting. And perhaps that's the paradox of our era. We can hear everything, but do we listen to anything? Every play, every share, every stream. It's a conversation with time itself. And like Edison said 100 years ago, what we record, we remember. What we share, we live again. Music is no longer just notes on paper or grooves on a desk. It's data, it's algorithm, it's infinite, but it is still human because we are still the ones pressing play. We began tonight with a horn. Mary Had a Little Lamb in 1877, a moment that changed everything. From wax cylinders to vinyl, from tape to CDs, from MP3s to streaming, music has always carried more than sound. It carries memory, emotion, humanity. Each era left its fingerprint. Caruso's opening wail, Noor Jahan's yearning, vital signs' anthems of a young nation, Junoon's rebellious chords, Daft Punk's digital dreams, all threads woven into the same human story. Music is not just entertainment, it's companionship, it's protest, it's history compressed into the rhythm and melody. It reminds us of who we were, who we are, and who we might become. And yet, for all the technology, all the platforms, the essence of music remains simple. A human being speaking to another human being, even across oceans, even across decades, even across the endless algorithms of a digital age. Think of the boy who first heard his father's records alone in Perth, or the teenager in Karachi rewinding a cassette of Dil Dil Pakistan, or the office worker in New York streaming Billie Eilish at midnight. All of them connected by sound. All of them part of a single heartbeat that stretches back to Edison's horn. Music has always been our bridge across space, across time, across the fragility of life itself. And maybe that's the lesson we learned tonight. Technology changes, formats fade, artists come and go, but the human need to listen, to feel, to share, that never changes. Music is memory made audible. It is emotion you can touch, hold, rewind, replay, and pass on. So whether it's a scratchy cylinder, a vinyl spinning in a living room, a cassette held close, a CD in your hand, or a track streamed to millions, remember this. We don't just listen to music, we live it. We live it again every time the song begins, every time we press play. And tonight, for a little while, we've traveled through time together, through the sound that made us human. I'm Adin Zia, and this was MeltDown.